Hi, this is Chris Ruddy. Today we're going to show you how to repair a busted fin box. And this is universal. It could be on a future fin box, an FCS fin box, or in this case we're doing today a Stavron fin box, which is one of them. So the quickest way to get this fin box out is to use an angle grinder like this. Okay, now we're going to use a basic flathead screwdriver as a tool to pop the fin box out that's broken. So I'm just gonna kind of come in here and see if I can get part of it out. There it goes. And then, so that's there, and it's busted. Sometimes if the fin box is still intact, you can break the fin box out and put the same fin box right back into place. In this case, there it goes. Okay, so now I'm going to take a sander. This is a hard disc with a 60 grit on it, and I'm going to go around the perimeter of the affected area, make sure there's no parts that are cracked and flaky, and then we're zooming. Okay, that's all it takes. Now if you notice, if you zoom in close, you see that there's fiberglass that's showing. That means I got in past the hot coat and I'm into the fiberglass a little bit. I was testing around to see if any of this stuff flakes off, which it's all intact, so that's good, you just leave it. And then you want to switch directions so that the wheel doesn't catch on the edge here and then send the sandpaper into your skin there. So everything's prepped. You see it's scratched from here all the way around to here, all the way to the edge. And so what we'll do now is we'll run a piece of tape across here and prepare to put the new fin box. So here's the new fin box, and we've got a dummy fin, so we're going to pop that in there like this. And that just holds the fin and lets you kind of see where it's at. You see it's sitting a little bit low here. So we'll add a little bit of Cavasil to the resin. You'll see how that is, and then we'll float this and get it to kick right there on top. Okay, so that's how it fits in. There's no problem finding out where it was because it goes right into the perfect spot. And then I'm going to put some gloves on so I don't get my hands all sticky. And you'd be really surprised at how little resin you need to actually fix a ding. Most of the time people think you need a big old cup like this full of resin. No, you don't. All you need is a tiny little cup with a tiny little bit of resin and you can get the job done. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of resin to this cup. We're just going to use this resin that's right here in the spillover cup. And believe it or not, I could do this whole thing with that little cup of resin. They're not much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a tiny little bit of, come on in. We're going to add a tiny little bit of white pigment, not too much, just a tiny little bit of white pigment. And that's going to give the resin a nice color to try to match what we're doing. Okay, and then we're going to put a little catalyst in, not a lot. This is going to be just so that we can get it to kick in a few minutes. And this will basically be the resin that holds the fin box in its perfect place. Once it kicks, then we're going to be good to put the fiberglass back on. Okay? So this is called Cavasil. A lot of people call it whatever, but it's just like a silica-based powder that goes into the resin, and it allows the resin to be thicker. And we're gonna add Cavasil till it's basically the consistency of kind of like a icing on a cake or something, a little bit like a peanut butter consistency, somewhere between that. But we don't want it to be so fluid that it allows the fin box to settle down. We don't want it to be so fluid that the fin box settles down below the surface. So we want to give it a little bit of solidity. And here we go. We're just adding a little bit more. So we got our catalyst. We got our pigment, and we've got our Cavasil. And Cavasil is great because you can come in nice and close here. And we're gonna just kind of taste this in with the stick and just kind of make sure it's scratched into the surface real good. And then we're gonna put it in here, make sure it's in all those nooks and crannies. You don't want a big bubbles underneath the fin box. You just want it to be kind of solid. And you just scratch it in like that. And then you take your fin and you squish it in like this. And if you see how it kind of holds it in place. So we need a little bit more. So we're going to take this out. We're going to add some more resin up here. Because we basically want this to be sealed up all the way underneath. And we don't want to have any little gaps anywhere. We're going to stick this in. We're going to push it down till it's somewhat flat. There we go. Now go around to the front. Look down. And so we're looking at the angle of the fins. And it looks like this one's just right. So now we're just going to kind of come in and seal up these little cracks right here. And you can use a number of different tools to do that. You could use the stick like this and kind of drag it across there like this. A lot of people try to wait, sand it, and do it. I like to do it all in one step. So you just kind of fill. And after it's filled in, come over here. I'm just going to fill that in, put a little extra. Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit of acetone in a bottle. Get one of these ketchup bottles at the 99-cent store. Get a paper towel. And we're just going to kind of clean up the area a little bit like this. You know, this is like, you know, when you go to the hospital and you have a surgery, this is the stuff the nurse does. The surgical assistant. And so you wipe all those smears off. And there you go. It's ready to go. So we're going to give this a few minutes to kick. What I mean by kick is it's just when the resin solidifies, and all the surfer guys call that kicking. Once it's kicked, then we pop out the dummy, tape it off, and we apply the fiberglass back. Okay, so now we're going to make a little bit, now that the fin has been set and we're waiting for it to harden and kick, we have a little bit of time to do something. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix up a little batch of clear UV catalyst resin that will actually go on top and harden very quickly so that we can get this thing sanded and back on the water. So here it goes. We're going to go over here. We're going to add a little bit of resin to this cup. And this won't harden until it sees sunlight. So this is enough to do the whole job and then some. So we're going to take this much resin, go over here to the resin station, and we're going to add a little bit of UV powder to this, which is found right here. Get the UV catalyst powder. You don't need very much for this little amount of resin. It's like that's enough right there. And then we're going to help that dilute into the resin by throwing a little styrene in there. And that's going to help dissolve the powder so it mixes in real nicely into the resin. Now, this resin is basically laminating resin. And laminating resin, even though it hardens, will never be sandable because it kind of stays gummy. And the reason it stays gummy is so that the new resin that you add on top of it won't have to be sanded. They bond together. So what we'll do is when we first make the UV resin, we're going to make it without wax in it or surfacing agent. And then once we have the fiberglass laminated on, we're going to put a coating of hot coat resin with this very same resin, but we're just going to add wax to it. The first patch we're going to make is going to be basically the size of the fin box plus about an inch. So we're going to make a piece that looks like a football, and it goes around that area. And then we're going to have a little opening in the middle for that little tab to pop out. Like this. And if you've done this a few times, you get used to the size. So there's our size right there. And that's our 6 ounce. We'll leave this here. And our 4 ounce, we're gonna make a little bit bigger than the 6 ounce, because this is the piece that goes on and smooths everything out. So we're gonna do a bigger football for this one, and we're not gonna cut out the center. So it's gonna go on like that. There you go. Okay, so now we're gonna put the tape on top of the fin box so we don't get resin inside of it. And we're gonna be nice and precise so it doesn't leak. Here we go. And then we're gonna tape this little part back here so we don't get resin in there. Okay, so our fin box is all ready. Now all we need to do is put the fiberglass on over here so that we don't get resin running off the side of the board. I'm gonna put the tape right there so that when the resin runs off, it comes over here and drips off this edge right here, so we don't have to worry about it running down onto the traction of the board. Like this, it's gonna be real easy to put that resin on the fiberglass, squeegee it down. So here we go. First piece goes on first, that's this one. We're gonna lay it on there, and we're gonna put it right in place, just like that. And we're gonna use a little brush. Okay. Goes on there like this, saturates, poke out the bubbles, wet it down, beautiful. Use the tip of the brush to poke the bubbles, go in nice and tight so you can see that there's no more bubbles. Can you see that? Zoom in nice and tight. Okay, now the second piece goes on top, like that. And then you just wet that down. Isn't fiberglass fun? You cut it out, put some resin on it, and then you sand it, and then you get nice and itchy. Okay, now we're gonna use the squeegee to just take out the excess. We'll run it off the side. This. Put it back in the cup. That. And flatten it out nice and tight. So it's nice and wet, nice and tight. That. Now we're going to get this to kick out in the sunlight for a few minutes, and then as soon as it kicks, we're going to put a hot coat on it with the same resin, but it's going to have the wax in it. A bit of this wax, do this to the resin. Now it's hot coat resin. So we're going to stir that in with the brush. Okay, we're taking the board outside to put in the UV rays. Notice that as soon as it gets into the sunlight, it's going to kick right away. Okay, so now the fiberglass and the resin from the lamination is all kicked. We can brush on the hot coat resin, which is also loaded up with the UV additive so that it'll harden real quickly in the sun. And we put this on kind of smooth and generously so that it flattens out. And then we're going to cover every part that had been touched with that laminating resin. And a real important thing is that you don't go past the scratched up prepped area. Because if you go past the scratched up prepped area, you're just wasting your time because you have to sand it all off. Resin won't stick to the board out here. If you put resin out here, it's not going to stick because it hasn't been scratched. So now the hot coat is on and we can take it out into the sun and then we can start sanding. All right, okay, so our fin repair is all cured. It's all hardened in the sun. And we're ready to sand it flat. So all the resin that we use is the right type. It's the hot coat resin, it's gonna sand. So we're gonna put a little weight down on the board just so that we can really push on it. Here we go. Okay, as you notice when we sand it flat, a few of these little bubble holes opened up. A few of these bubble holes open up over here and here. And so we're gonna put a little bit of that hot coat UV resin on just to make sure that everything's sealed once it's flat. We're gonna block it so that it's majorly flat, super flat. We got 60 grit on the 3M block, and that was all. Block that. Now we know that's flat. We're going to sand it with a little bit of 220. Smooth it out a little bit. Okay, so after you sand the area flat with the 60 grit and maybe some 220, we tape it off again and we put a little bit of hot coat resin on top. This has also got the UV additive in it, and we brush it on top like this. We go around all the areas that were scratched up and we brush this on real carefully, real clean, and it goes basically over the ding area. We're gonna go back out in the sun with it, get it to kick, be hard, and then we're gonna sand it with two. Now, our resin coating that we put on top of the sanded finish is all cured, and we're gonna do a finish sand with some 220 grit on a random orbital, which gives it a nice smooth finish. All resin, no weave, and we'll have the edges nice and sharp. We have the board machine sanded. We're going to do a quick hand sand on it, make sure everything feels smooth, sharpen the edges. Okay, so we're all finished up, except for just a couple of things. So we're going to take the old fin screw out of the old broken box. And remove that, and we need to replace it into the new one, so we're going to do that, put that back in, so our board's all ready to have a fin put in. Okay, right below the surface. Okay, now we're going to take our Rust-Oleum clear mat and we're going to give it a little coating of that, and it's going to make it look like it never happened. Put it on there, a little on the tail, and there you have it. When this dries, it's going to look perfect and ready to go back to the customer for some more good times out on the water. Thanks for watching our video.